Ryan Blake thought he knew everything about his new wife, Lana Pierce, until a single message from a hidden email shattered the illusion and unlocked a secret so powerful it ended in blood. What began as a picture-perfect love story spiraled into a chilling nightmare, where friendship masked fear, truth lived in silence, and one man's obsession with betrayal led to a brutal, calculated murder. By the time Detective Miles Carter arrived at the remote cabin, Lana was gone, and Ryan had vanished without a trace. This is the story of a honeymoon built on lies, a past buried too deep, and a truth that cost a life. Ryan Blake had always been the type of man who believed in control of his body, his future, his emotions. A former high school football star turned personal trainer, he ran a small but successful fitness studio in downtown Raleigh. By all appearances, Ryan had it all. A strong jawline, a growing business, and a long line of admirers who came and went like the seasons. But none of them ever seemed to fit until Lana Pierce. She entered his life like a quiet storm. It began during the pandemic, when loneliness wrapped tightly around everyone like a second skin. Ryan had downloaded a dating app on a whim one evening, swiping through profiles with boredom more than interest. Lana's photo stood out immediately. She wasn't flashy or overtly posed. Her beauty was natural. Almond-shaped eyes, a delicate smile, soft blonde hair that framed her face like something out of a dream. There was something in her look, a kind of grace that made Ryan pause. He swiped right. They clicked instantly. Her messages were thoughtful, never shallow. They didn't talk much about physical attraction. Instead, their conversations dove deep, childhood stories, favorite books, shared fears. Lana had a calming effect on Ryan. She listened. She understood, and more importantly, she never tried to impress him. She was simply real. Or so he thought. Because of lockdowns, they didn't meet in person for several months. But the connection didn't fade. When they finally did meet at a local park, Ryan was nervous. He worried maybe the spark wouldn't translate. But the moment he saw her walk across the grass in a pale blue sundress, barefoot, holding 2 iced coffees, he knew this was different. She was different. Their chemistry was instant, their bond unspoken. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Lana had just moved to Raleigh a year earlier and worked remotely as a graphic designer. She had few friends in the area, but Ryan introduced her to his circle, and everyone liked her. Some of them even teased Ryan, saying he was finally settling down. He laughed it off, but knew, deep down, it was true. She made him feel grounded. He could talk to her about anything, except for the occasional times she changed the subject when the topic turned toward her past. Whenever he brought up childhood memories or asked about old relationships, Lana would answer vaguely. "It's not that interesting," she'd say with a smile. "Let's talk about something better." He never pushed her. He liked that she wasn't obsessed with the past. After 8 months together, Ryan proposed. It wasn't elaborate, no flash mobs or viral videos, just the two of them on the rooftop of her apartment. The city lights flickering below. Lana cried and nodded yes, burying her face into his chest. That night, Ryan posted a photo of her ring on social media. The likes poured in. Everyone said they were perfect together. The wedding came quickly, a small but elegant event at a vineyard outside Asheville. White roses lined the aisle, and Lana walked toward him in a flowing gown that shimmered in the late afternoon sun. She looked almost ethereal. Ryan couldn't stop staring. Everything felt perfect, like a scene from a film. But films are edited. They leave out the shadows, the unspoken lines, the truths buried behind the curtain. What Ryan didn't know was that Lana had lived a very different life before she met him, one that didn't start with iced coffees and quiet parks. She had rewritten her story, one choice at a time, with precision and care. But some stories don't stay buried forever, and secrets, no matter how deeply hidden, have a strange way of rising to the surface. All it takes is the wrong question, the right suspicion, and the unraveling begins. And somewhere in the crowd at their wedding, someone knew. A look, a whisper, a shadow passing across the face of a smiling guest. Ryan never noticed. He was too busy believing in the illusion he thought was love. The sun was high above the turquoise waters of Belize when Ryan and Lana stepped off the small plane. Their honeymoon had finally begun. A week of sun, sea, and seclusion. The resort was luxurious, tucked away from crowds, with private villas and hammocks that swayed gently in the ocean breeze. On the surface, it was a paradise designed for lovers, but even on that first day, something felt off. Lana was quiet, not silent, just distant. She smiled when she needed to, laughed at his jokes, but her eyes seemed distracted, constantly flicking toward the ocean or down to her phone. Ryan chalked it up to travel fatigue. They'd both been planning the wedding for months, with barely a moment to breathe. Maybe she just needed time to relax. But as the days went on, the distance between them grew more noticeable. On their second night, they dined by candlelight on the beach. A private chef served fresh lobster and poured chilled champagne. Everything was perfect, the kind of moment couples dream about. Ryan leaned in to hold her hand across the table, but Lana hesitated, just for a second before placing her hand in his. It was subtle, but he noticed. He smiled anyway, pushing down the flicker of doubt. Later that evening, back at the villa, Lana claimed she had a headache and went to bed early. Ryan lay beside her, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above, trying to ignore the tightening in his chest. He felt like a guest in his own honeymoon. The intimacy, the warmth they had shared so effortlessly before, was suddenly strained, like there was an invisible wall between them. By the fourth day, that wall grew higher. Lana spent more time on her phone, sneaking away to take calls in the bathroom or out on the villa's patio. Ryan caught fragments of hushed conversations, phrases like, "I can't tell him," and "not yet." His curiosity burned hotter with each whisper. Who was she talking to? What couldn't she say? One morning, while she was showering, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a message preview. "He doesn't know, right?" The sender was listed only as A. Ryan's heart pounded. He didn't open the message, but the words echoed in his mind like a drum beat. That afternoon, they took a snorkeling excursion with a local guide. The water was calm, the reef colorful and alive, but the silence between them spoke volumes. Lana smiled politely, took photos, even held his hand as they floated side by side, but it all felt rehearsed, like a performance she was determined to keep up until the trip ended. Ryan kept pretending too unsure what to believe. That night, Lana sat outside on the deck long after Ryan had gone to bed. She stared into the darkness, the waves crashing below. In her hands was a small piece of folded paper. She opened it, read it again, then tore it into tiny pieces and let them scatter into the wind. Inside the villa, Ryan lay awake, pretending to sleep. He had seen her holding that paper earlier in the day. It wasn't a receipt, it wasn't a menu. It was something she'd written. By the final day, Ryan had started to question everything. Not just the honeymoon, but the wedding, the relationship, the months leading up to it. Little things began to replay in his mind. Her avoidance of certain topics, the way she changed the subject when he mentioned her family, how she always redirected conversations that edged too close to her past. As they boarded the plane back to North Carolina, Ryan held her hand, but his grip was looser now. Lana leaned her head on his shoulder, and to an outsider, they still looked like the picture of newlywed bliss. But something inside Ryan had shifted. A quiet suspicion had rooted itself deep in his gut, and no amount of smiles or kisses could make it go away. He didn't know what the truth was yet, but he knew there was one, and he was going to find it. The return home felt hollow. Ryan couldn't explain it, but the moment they stepped through the front door of their apartment, the silence felt heavier than before. The honeymoon photos were already on social media. Lana had posted them within hours of landing. Her captions were cheerful, her smile flawless, but to Ryan, it all felt staged. He saw something behind her eyes now, a flicker, a shadow, and it refused to leave his mind. Days passed, but the tension remained. Lana tried to ease back into routine, folding laundry, cooking dinner, asking about his clients. But everything she did seemed overly careful, like she was measuring every word. Ryan responded in kind. He smiled, nodded, even kissed her forehead. But inside, a storm was building. That message on her phone, the one from someone labeled only as A, haunted him. He doesn't know, right? What didn't he know? The real turning point came one rainy Tuesday afternoon. Ryan arrived home early from a cancelled training session and found Lana out running errands. She had left her laptop open on the kitchen table. He stared at it for a long time, torn between guilt and obsession. Finally, the curiosity won. He opened the email tab. At first, there was nothing unusual. Work messages, shopping receipts, a few newsletters. But then he found a hidden folder labeled personal. Inside were emails going back several months. All from the same sender, Angela Moore. Ryan remembered the name vaguely. Lana had mentioned her once or twice. A friend from a long time ago. But what he read now twisted his stomach. Most of the emails were encrypted in vague phrases, like two people speaking in code. But the subject line said enough. Does he suspect? Should I delete the old files? You need to be careful. And then there was one message that chilled him. If Ryan finds out the truth, I don't think he'll forgive you. You should have told him before the wedding. Ryan's heart pounded as he reread the words. The truth. What truth? He scanned the messages mestiously, looking for something concrete, but Angela had been careful. Nothing direct. Nothing that could be read out of context, unless you were looking for it. And Ryan was now looking at everything through a new lens. That night, he didn't mention the laptop. He didn't ask about Angela. He just watched Lana carefully. She hummed softly while cleaning up after dinner, moving around the kitchen like nothing was wrong. But Ryan saw every movement as suspicious now. Why was she pretending so hard? What else had she hidden? 2 days later, he made up a story about a late training session and followed her instead. Lana drove to a quiet coffee shop in a part of town. Ryan barely recognized. She sat alone for nearly 20 minutes until a woman joined her. Angela. She looked familiar, like someone he'd seen in passing before. Their conversation was intense. Angela kept glancing around, nervous. Lana looked on the verge of tears. Ryan stayed hidden, watching from his car across the street. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but the body language told a story of panic and urgency. At one point Angela reached across the table and gripped Lana's hands. Lana nodded, then covered her face, clearly shaken. Ryan snapped a photo of the two women together. He didn't know why, maybe for proof, maybe for leverage. Later that night, while Lana was in the shower, Ryan stared at the photo on his phone. He zoomed in on Lana's face, eyes red, lips pressed tightly together. Something was unraveling, and she was terrified. But of what? Or of who? He couldn't ask her. Not yet. He needed answers first, real answers. And there was only one person who could give them. The woman in the photo, Angela Moore. The next morning, Ryan sat in his car just a block away from Angela Moore's apartment, the engine running but the world around him still. He had found her address through a quick search of her name combined with the city. It wasn't hard. Angela had an old art portfolio listed under her name, and one forgotten page led him to her mailing address. He had never stalked anyone before, but something about the last few days had pushed him into uncharted territory. He told himself it wasn't stalking, it was investigation. He had the right to know. He waited there for almost 2 hours. Finally, Angela appeared, hair tied back, sunglasses on, moving quickly down the front steps of her building. She looked over her shoulder twice before getting into her car. Ryan didn't follow her this time. He just wanted to see her up close, to measure the nervous energy she radiated. She was hiding something, and now he was sure of it. That night, he called her. He didn't have her number saved, but he'd seen it once in one of Lana's emails and memorized it. When Angela answered, her voice was cautious, tight. Ryan didn't waste time. He said he knew there was something Lana hadn't told him. Something important. He said he read their emails and wanted the truth. No more games. There was silence on the other end. long enough for Ryan to think she had hung up. Then came a slow exhale. Angela said she had begged Lana to be honest before the wedding. That this wasn't something that could stay buried forever. That secrets like this grow teeth. Ryan gripped the phone tighter, his chest tightening with every word. Then she said it. Lana was transgender. She had transitioned nearly a decade ago, before she moved to North Carolina, before she met Ryan, before she became Lana Pierce. Her identity had been legally changed. Her surgery had been completed. To the world, and to Ryan, she was a woman in every visible way. Angela insisted Lana hadn't set out to deceive him, she just didn't know how to say it. She was afraid that if she told him the truth, it would all come crashing down. Ryan felt the air leave his lungs. Every sound around him seemed to dull, replaced by the roar of blood in his ears. His mind spun through the past year like a film on fast forward. The laughs, the kisses, the promises, the wedding. He felt betrayed, humiliated, even stupid. How hadn't he seen it? Angela begged him to stay calm. Said Lana didn't deserve punishment for trying to protect herself. Ryan didn't respond. He hung up, staring at the wall in front of him, still gripping the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. The next few days moved like a dream, or a nightmare. Ryan couldn't focus at work. He stared blankly at his clients. He didn't sleep. He barely ate. Lana noticed. She asked if he was okay, but he lied. Said he was tired, stressed from work. She believed him, or maybe she wanted to. But something inside Ryan had shifted in a way that couldn't be undone. He wasn't sure how to process what he now knew. It wasn't just that Lana had lied, it was that he had loved her, believed in her, and now everything felt tainted. Rewritten, he began to watch her again, not with affection, but calculation. How she moved, what she said, who she texted. Every smile now seemed artificial. Every word felt rehearsed. He didn't confront her, not yet. He wanted to understand more. But the fire had already started burning inside him, and once lit, it would only grow hotter. In the shadows of their quiet apartment, a new version of Ryan was taking shape, one driven not by love, but by obsession. And obsession never ends clean. Ryan no longer saw Lana as the woman he married. He saw a stranger sleeping beside him, a stranger who had rewritten her past and drawn him into a story he hadn't agreed to be a part of. Each morning he watched her move around the apartment with ease, cooking breakfast, tying her hair up, scrolling on her phone as if everything were normal. But everything had changed. He stopped touching her. He stopped asking how her day was. He no longer kissed her goodbye when he left for work. Lana noticed. She began to tread carefully around him, her voice softer, her gestures more cautious. When she asked if something was wrong, he shook his head. Just tired, he'd mutter. But his eyes told a different story. They were colder now, distant and unreadable. Inside, Ryan was unraveling. The revelation had taken root like a poison. He couldn't stop thinking about it. He couldn't stop imagining the jokes people would make if they ever found out. The shame churned inside him like acid. He told himself he wasn't transphobic. That wasn't the issue, he thought. It was about being lied to, about being made feel like a fool. At least, that's what he told himself. The only person he confided in was Noah Trent, his oldest friend. One night, after a few drinks, he told him everything. How he found the emails, what Angela had said, and how he didn't know what to do. Noah had listened quietly, then leaned back and said, "Walk away, man. Just leave. If you can't handle it, don't destroy her. Just walk away." But walking away didn't feel like justice. It felt like defeat. Ryan began spending more nights away from home. He claimed to be sleeping at the gym, dealing with late clients, helping a friend. Lana didn't question him, but he could sense the fear in her eyes now. She was starting to realize something had changed. One night she left a small note on the bathroom mirror. "I know things feel strange. Please talk to me when you're ready. I love you." He tore it in half without reading the rest. By the end of the week, Lana had begun writing a letter to Angela. Long and emotional, she poured her fears onto the page, confessing she believed Ryan had found out. She described his silence, his coldness, the way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. She wrote that she was scared, not of what he would say but of what he might do. She didn't send the letter. She folded it and placed it in the drawer beside her bed. Ryan found it the next day while she was out. He read every word, standing perfectly still, the paper trembling in his hands. His pulse slowed. She was afraid of him. She had good reason to be. And that realization gave him a kind of power he hadn't felt before. She was vulnerable now. She had no idea what he was capable of. The idea came quietly, without drama or a sudden spark. Just a dark, whispering thought that took shape in the back of his mind. If the lie broke everything, maybe the truth could die with it. He didn't flinch at the thought. He embraced it. When he suggested they take a weekend trip to get away, to reconnect, to start fresh, Lana's eyes lit up. Hope returned to her voice. She packed eagerly, choosing her favorite outfits, checking the weather at their cabin in upstate New York. She thought they were going to heal, to rebuild what had been cracked. But Ryan wasn't planning a vacation. He was planning something final. And he had already decided only one of them would return. The car ride was quiet, filled with the low hum of tires on wet pavement and the occasional sound of wind against the windows. Lana gazed out at the passing trees, her face lit briefly by the dull flashes of sunlight breaking through the overcast sky. She smiled a few times, trying to make small talk, asking about music, about whether they'd stop for lunch, about the cabin's layout. Ryan answered in short, clipped phrases. He kept his eyes on the road, his hands tight on the steering wheel. He pretended he was tired. In truth, he was focused, rehearsing every step in his mind. The cabin was tucked deep into the woods, far from any neighboring homes or cell towers. It belonged to a client of Ryan's, a property used mainly in off-season months for hunting trips. He'd borrowed the keys weeks before, long before he'd even told Lana about the trip. It was isolated, cold, and quiet. Perfect. When they arrived, Lana took a deep breath and stepped out into the crisp mountain air. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Ryan nodded, carrying in their bags. The inside was rustic, wood-paneled walls, a fireplace, a single bedroom upstairs. Lana moved around the cabin slowly, running her fingers across the windowsill, opening the small fridge, smiling to herself. For the first time in weeks, she looked relaxed, hopeful. She thought this was a new beginning. Ryan cooked that night, something he rarely did. He grilled steaks on the fire pit outside, while Lana poured them wine and lit candles in the living room. She played music from her phone, old jazz records she loved, and danced lightly across the wooden floor in her socks. Ryan watched her from the porch, his eyes unreadable. He said nothing. He was thinking about the shovel hidden under the stairs, the rope he'd packed in the back seat under the spare tire, the tarp in the shed outside. He had prepared everything. Now all he had to do was wait. That night, she curled up beside him in bed. She whispered that she was glad they came, that things felt better, that maybe they could start over. Ryan didn't respond. He stared at the ceiling until her breathing slowed and she drifted off to sleep. His heart didn't race. His hands didn't shake. He had already gone numb. By morning, the storm had arrived. Rain hammered the windows and drenched the trees outside. The fog rolled in thick and pale, swallowing the woods. Lana woke up alone. Ryan was outside, stacking firewood, his hoodie soaked. She made coffee, watched him through the window, and smiled. She didn't know it was the last time she'd ever smile. Sometime around noon, the screams echoed through the forest, but no one was around to hear them. No hikers, no rangers, no distant neighbors. Only the birds overhead scattered from the trees, startled by the noise. Then there was silence. 3 days later, Angela reported Lana missing. She had tried calling, texting, messaging through every app they used. Nothing. No posts, no replies, no activity at all. She drove to the apartment and knocked on the door. Ryan didn't answer. The place was empty. She called the police. The search began quietly, but escalated quickly. Detectives tracked Ryan's credit card to the gas station near the cabin. The manager remembered him. Surveillance showed him paying for snacks, firewood and gloves, alone. Police arrived at the cabin 2 days later. What they found was chaos. Blood stains on the wooden floor, drag marks, a shattered wine glass, a blood-soaked scarf caught in the bushes near the fire pit. In the pit itself, they found burned bone fragments, melted jewelry, charred fabric and ash that was still damp from the rain. The DNA results would later confirm it beyond doubt. Lana Pierce was dead, and Ryan Blake was gone. The cabin crime scene was more than just a place of violence. It was a portrait of calculated rage. Investigators moved slowly through the space, photographing every smear, every splatter, every displaced item. The bed was neatly made, untouched since that final night. The breakfast dishes were still in the sink, but beneath the stillness was something darker, more deliberate. Ryan hadn't acted in a fit of emotion. He had prepared, and now he had vanished. Detective Miles Carter, a seasoned investigator with 20 years of homicide experience, was assigned to the case. He'd seen many things, murders born from jealousy, addiction, and desperation, but something about this one disturbed him deeply. It wasn't just the brutality, it was the method, the coldness, the way Ryan had left no clear trace of himself in the aftermath, as if he'd become a ghost. The first lead came from a nearby gas station's surveillance footage. Ryan was seen alone, wearing a gray hoodie, sunglasses, and gloves, walking calmly into the store, just 2 hours after the estimated time of Lana's death. He bought firewood and lighter fluid. There was no panic in his movements, no urgency, just quiet purpose. Investigators traced his route south from the cabin using scattered clues. A bus ticket purchased under a fake name in Syracuse, a backpack found abandoned at a rest stop near the Pennsylvania border, and witness reports of a man matching his description boarding a Greyhound headed toward Georgia. Back at the cabin, forensic teams worked through the fire pit debris. Lana's engagement ring was recovered, melted out of shape, but unmistakable. Fragments of her bones were carefully extracted and sent for testing. Weeks later, the DNA match confirmed it beyond doubt. What little remained of Lana had been destroyed by fire and rain. Detective Carter reviewed every piece of footage, every receipt, every message from Ryan's phone records. Before disappearing, Ryan had wiped his devices clean. He hadn't used his credit card since the day of the murder. He hadn't called friends or family. It was as if he'd stepped out of his life and into someone else's. Angela Moore was questioned again. She was distraught, her voice shaking during every interview. She handed over Lana's unsent letter, the one she had written days before her death, but never mailed. The paper was tear-stained, the words scrawled in a rushed, uneven hand. Lana had written about her fear, how Ryan had grown cold, how she no longer recognized the man she loved. She had said goodbye, even if she didn't know it at the time. Public interest in the case exploded. News outlets labeled it a honeymoon horror story. Online forums dissected every detail. Some speculated Ryan had planned the murder months in advance. Others argued he had snapped, but there was no clear answer. Only the haunting question: how could a man so in love commit such a monstrous act? 3 weeks after the murder, police in rural Georgia received an anonymous tip. A man matching Ryan's description had been seen living in an abandoned trailer near a wooded area just outside a small town. He kept to himself, bought food with cash, and avoided cameras. Local authorities moved in quickly. When they arrived, Ryan didn't resist. He was thinner, bearded, his eyes hollow. In the corner of the trailer was a single duffel bag containing clothes, cash, and the remnants of his old life. His wedding band, a photo of him and Lana, from their honeymoon, and a burned corner of a letter with only 2 words still legible: "Forgive me." Detective Carter flew down personally to oversee the extradition. He looked into Ryan's face and saw no remorse, only exhaustion. A man who had built his own prison long before the walls closed in. Ryan didn't deny what he did, but when asked why, he gave no explanation. Only silence. Ryan Blake sat stone-faced in the courtroom as the trial began, his eyes fixed on the table in front of him, unmoving. The room was full, press, curious onlookers, family members of both the victim and the accused. Lana's friends sat in the front row, their faces drawn with grief and disbelief. Angela Moore was among them, clutching a folded tissue in one hand and Lana's unsent letter in the other. She had refused to speak publicly until now, but today her voice would be heard. The prosecution wasted no time painting the picture of premeditated murder. They showed the jury Ryan's internet searches weeks before the trip, questions about burn temperatures, forensic detection in wooded areas, and how to dispose of human remains. They played surveillance footage from the gas station, displayed the cabin photos in painful detail, and entered into evidence the text messages and email records recovered from Lana's accounts. It was methodical, chilling, and undeniable. Ryan's defense didn't argue the facts. They didn't deny he killed Lana. Instead, they claimed emotional betrayal, that Ryan had been pushed to a breaking point, that discovering Lana's past had caused a psychological fracture. They called it temporary insanity, a moment of uncontrollable rage, but the evidence told a different story, one of planning, precision, and silence. The jury listened, but the doubt never took root. Angela was called to testify midway through the trial. She walked to the stand slowly, holding herself upright like her strength might break at any moment. In a clear, unwavering voice, she read Lana's letter aloud. The words echoed through the room like a final breath. Lana had written about fear, about love, about the hope that Ryan would still see her for who she was, not for the past she couldn't change. There wasn't a person in the courtroom untouched by her words. Even the bailiff wiped a tear from his eye. Then came the verdict. After just 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. Ryan Blake was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He showed no emotion. He didn't speak, he simply stood, listened, and was led away in handcuffs. Outside the courthouse, Detective Miles Carter gave a short statement. He praised the investigation team and acknowledged the pain the case had caused. This was never just about a murder, he said. It was about identity, secrecy, and the danger of hatred that hides beneath love. Reporters jotted down every word, but none of it could undo what had already been done. Angela visited Lana's gravesite a week after the sentencing. She brought the wedding photo she had retrieved from the cabin's ash heap. Partially burned, edges curled, but Lana's smile still visible. She placed it at the foot of the stone and sat quietly, whispering apologies into the wind. She blamed herself for not doing more, not saying something sooner, not forcing Lana to speak before it was too late. In the years that followed, true crime podcasts, documentaries, and books dissected the case. Some called it a tragic misunderstanding. Others labeled it a hate crime disguised as heartbreak. But for those who truly knew Lana Pierce, she was more than a headline. She was kind, gentle, creative, a woman who had rebuilt her life with strength and dignity, only to have it stolen in the most intimate betrayal imaginable. Ryan remains behind bars, refusing interviews, never offering a reason, a motive, or a shred of remorse. His silence has become part of the legacy, a final, unanswered question in a story full of them. And in that silence, the world is left to wonder, was it ever really love, or was it always just control disguised as devotion?